Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today on the channel, we are taking a look at The Lord of the Rings Adventure to Mount Doom, a cooperative game from Michael Rennick with illustrations by Alexander Kars. And I really want to call out the art in this game because I think it's pretty fantastic. And it's the thing that actually got me to buy the game because I'm not a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. I love The Hobbit. But The Lord of the Rings, I think, is just okay. I love the movies, but I'm not a big fan of the books. But let's read a little bit about The Lord of the Rings Adventure to Mount Doom. Frodo's quest to destroy the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom is fraught with peril. Luckily, his loyal companions are ready to protect him on his journey. With smart dice selection, players work together to move the Fellowship figures across the game board, a beautifully illustrated map of Middle-earth. Yes, I agree. And let's see, will Frodo reach Mount Doom before he loses his confidence? In this cooperative fantasy board game, all players will win or lose together. So while this game says it's a cooperative game, in all actuality, it really is just a solo game. There isn't much for each individual player to do while another player is taking their turn. There are no different characteristics to the different members of the Fellowship. So in all actuality, this really is just a solo game. And in this solo game, you are trying to get the Fellowship standee, so that is Sam and Frodo. You are trying to get them from Rivendell down here all the way up to Mount Doom up in the upper right-hand corner of the map. And to do that, you will be rolling dice and moving the Fellowship together individually, but you want to keep them as grouped together as possible. And so in the Fellowship, we have Legolas. He is represented by the green die. And then we have Aragorn with the blue die. We have Gimli with the red die. And then Merry and Pippin with the purple die. And then the Fellowship is the orange die. And then we also have these two encounter die and a die to use for combat. So the game board is basically just a track, and once I noticed that, I felt a little disappointed because I was so in love with the art on this board. I thought it looked amazing, and it's one of the main reasons why I bought this game to begin with. And I was expecting more of an adventure game, but really this is a dice rolling, somewhat puzzle game, a little bit of hand management, some resource management. But the track is divided into stages. So the first stage here is Rivendell to Lothlorien, and then we have Lothlorien to Rohan, and then Rohan to Helm's Deep to Gondor, Gondor to Minas Morgul, and Minas Morgul to Mount Doom. And you want to try to move the Fellowship as evenly as possible. And you don't want Sam and Frodo, the Fellowship standee, to get too far out ahead of the rest of the Fellowship, because the Fellowship who is ahead of the ring bearers but not yet past the next stage end, they can help in battle. So they're kind of like scouts. They're going out ahead of Sam and Frodo and fighting things on their behalf. If Sam and Frodo get too far ahead of the rest of the Fellowship, then they are in harm's way. They are in danger. As you are traveling from one location to the next, you will have a certain number of random encounters, and each of the stages has some certain cards associated with it. So we have our Lothlorien cards here, and the Lothlorien cards, each stage will have a number of good cards and bad cards. The good cards, when you encounter them, you can take them into your hand, and these become ways to mitigate bad luck. At the beginning of the game, you will have a randomly drawn Gandalf card, and then Gandalf can help you out. You will start with the Boromir card, and then as you gain more friend cards, you can pull those into your hand, and those can be used one time during the game to help mitigate some bad luck. The rest of the encounter cards will be various bad cards. You might come across the Balrog, in which you'll have to take certain damage. You can fight a cave troll, in which you'll have to roll the combat die or take 2 damage. You can have an orc fight. You might have to place some Nazgul on the Nazgul track. So here we have the Witch King. He's hanging out at Minas Morgul. And then we have 8 different places for Nazgul. If this ever fills up, then it is game over. So this is kind of a threat track that you have to keep. You have to manage. And then we also might have Saruman here, who is going to be making his Urukai over in Isengard. And Isengard is up here in the left-hand corner, and certain Urukai will be placed on this track, and that will dictate the damage and certain combat things that happen when you fight the Urukai. So you want to try to keep this down as well as the Minas Morgul track here. We also have 2 tokens here that will represent Gandalf and Treebeard. Treebeard, when you get him as a friend, he can come over here and he can help you in Isengard. And then Gandalf can maybe help somehow over in Helm's Deep. But those will be only triggered by certain cards that you might have in your hand, certain friend cards or powerful cards. Okay, so my fellowship figure has reached Lothlorien, so now I'm ready to set up the next stage of the adventure. And that is Lothlorien to Rohan. So I'm going to take the Rohan cards and give those a shuffle. There are 7 cards, and in each game you only use 6. So we will take those, and we have a track down here. And this track corresponds to the roll of a black die here, the event die, and then you will have to do what it says. And so you will take a face down card at 1, a face down card at 6, and then you will put 2, 3, 4, and 5 face up. So we have Saruman, so he will be continuing to create Urukai up in Isengard. We have King Theoden, so King Theoden is a good card, so we can take him into our hand if we roll a 3. And we have the Urukai, which is a bad card, and then we have one more, and we have the Wargs, which is a bad card. Now, we don't know what this card is, so this card goes back into the box, and we don't know what these cards are. These will be blind draws. Playing this game is really simple. It is a family weight game, and so each turn will have a couple of different rolls of dice. So you will take both of your encounter dice here, and then you can choose which of the fellowship you want to roll for. And so I want to try to bring Merry and Pippin. They're down here. They're below Lothlorien. I want to try to bring them up. So I'll roll the purple die, and then you also choose another die. Let's go with Aragorn. And so we will roll all of these. Okay, a 4, a 5, a 3, and a 4. So we have the 4 and the 5 on our 2 encounter cards. And those represent the Urukai is at 4, and the Wargs are at 5. And so we can choose which one we want to encounter. I want to encounter the Wargs because that card gets discarded after it's encountered, and then space 5 becomes a space that I can possibly move Aragorn if I ever roll 5. So that's really good. Okay, so I will place, so that's at 5. I'll place the 5 here on the book, locking that in. So we actually have a choice here between which encounter. And then I will go ahead and move Merry and Pippin up 3. So we'll lock that into the lighter spot in the book. And now we continue to roll this blue die, and we roll this die. And now we can choose another fellowship die to add to the pool. So I will take the Gimli's die, and I'll roll those. Okay, so now my choices are somewhat limited because I only have 1 encounter die. So I have to do the 1. I think this game would be a lot better if it came with 3 encounter D6, and that way each of the times you roll on your turn, you get a choice. The second time you roll, there is no choice with that encounter die, and so it kind of, I don't know, it's weird. You might as well just choose which one you're doing first on the first roll, and then lock that second die in, because the second roll of the black die really doesn't matter. But now we can move Aragorn 5, or we can move Gimli 4. Let's go ahead and move Aragorn 5. Okay, so now that part of the turn is done. Now we do the action. We commit to these actions. So we have to have encounter number 5, which is against the Wargs. A nasty surprise with teeth and claws. The fellowship loses 2 courage. And so there's a fellowship track over here. If that ever falls off the track, then that's another way that the game can be lost. But I lose 2 courage, so I go down to 2. There are ways to gain courage as well, and most of those will happen if you ever roll the exact number of spaces you need to move into one of the stage endings. So let's see. Now we can also move Merry and Pippin up 3, so they're right here. So 1, 2, 3. So they have moved and they have joined Legolas just outside of Lothlorien. Okay, so now we have this die here, number 1. So we will blind draw card 1. What is it? Oh, cool, it's Galadriel. All right, so before rolling in battle, move the 1 ring to the Galadriel space on the courage track. So she's right here, and she's pretty low on the board. Let me move this camera over a little bit. So Galadriel is right here. So you don't want to play this card until the courage track gets pretty far down, and then you can play Galadriel, and that's will be kind of like a second chance to get a second win towards the end of the game. And this is one of the main decisions you are going to be making while you're playing this game, is when to play these cards. Because these friendship cards, these are one use. And so once you use them, they are out of the game. So I think a good game will be seeing that these are played as late as possible to help mitigate your bad luck as the bad things start snowballing. But let's go back to Lothlorien and check in with the Fellowship. And so we did our encounter 1, and now we can move Aragorn 5 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are a couple spaces on the board. There are a couple spaces will have icons. If a character ever lands directly on or ends their movement on a heart space, then the Fellowship loses a courage. If a member of the Fellowship ever lands on one of these ring wraith spots, then you will add a ring wraith to the track there, and that'll be one step closer to the end of the game. Okay, so we've had encounter 1, we've had encounter 5. Both of those are removed from that track towards the bottom there, and now it would be the next player's turn, or because this is basically a solo game, it's your turn again, and you can do the same thing. So Merry and Pippin and Legolas, we really want to move them forward before we move Sam and Frodo forward. So let's roll Legolas. Let's roll both of their dice, and maybe we can move one of them fast. Okay, a 6, perfect. Okay, so we have a 1, a 6, and a 6 and a 2. If we go to the 1 down here on the track, we can see, because we've removed that Galadriel card from 1, that 1 is now a wild space. Not a wild space, but 1 is now a permanent space where if we choose 1, we can choose to move Sam and Frodo 0, 1, or 2 spaces. Hey, that's pretty good. I think we will do that. Okay, so I'll lock in my 1. I will lock in a 6 for Legolas. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ooh, that'll put him right here. That's fine. We can add one of the ring wraiths. That's fine. And then we will re-roll that other encounter die. We will keep Merry and Pippin's die in our pool. And I think we will go ahead and add Gimli to the mix here. Okay, hey, another 1. Nice. And then a 4 and a 2. Let's go ahead and move Gimli 4. And then, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. All right, so we have a 1. So we can choose to move the Fellowship here, the ring bearers, from 0 to 2 spaces. I think I'm going to move them 2. I will move them 1. So that way I don't hit on that courage space. And then I will also move Legolas 6, which brings him up here to this ring wraith space. And I will add 1 ring wraith to my track. So I have 2 ring wraiths on the track now. And now I will initiate my other 1. So I will move the Fellowship, or the ring. I keep calling these the Fellowship. I will move Sam and Frodo 2, 1, 2. And then I will move Gimli 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so on. So that's kind of how the game is played. When you have a battle, so this battle here against the Uruk-hai, you roll the battle die, and then any of the Fellowship members who are ahead of Sam and Frodo, or on the same space as them, not yet past the next stage ending space, they have a corresponding icon. And if you roll that icon, you win the combat. If you don't roll one of those icons, you lose the combat. And if you ever roll the Eye of Sauron, you immediately lose the combat. Or if you roll a Gandalf, you can discard a Gandalf card to win the combat. So in this case here, if I was fighting these Uruk-hai, we have in the battle, we would have Legolas, we would have Aragorn, and Gimli. And so I would roll my d6 here, and I rolled the Eye of Saruman, or Eye of Sauron, I should say. Sorry about that, fans. The Eye of Sauron. That was one of those things, right? That people who aren't into Lord of the Rings are like, okay, Tolkien, Sauron and Saruman. You could have chosen any two names. Why did those have to be so similar? I know. Here come the Lord of the Rings fans to tell me exactly why those names are so similar and why they couldn't just take the Eagles to Mount Doom. One of those questions, right? I know it's dumb, but but so we lost the battle because we rolled the eye, and now for each Uruk-hai in Isengard, you lose that much courage. There are 3 Uruk-hai, so I go down 1, 2, 3. And so that's basically how that would work. If I had rolled a green symbol, a blue symbol, or a red symbol, then I would have won that combat. And you don't get any rewards for winning combat. And that's basically how the rest of the game is played. Each of the stages will have a certain number of encounter cards. As the stages progress, the number of friendships will get less, will become fewer. You will have fewer opportunities to gain those friendships, but you might be able to hire the army of the dead to help you on that final kind of stage from Gondor to Minas Morgul. And then here we have our final cards here, where Gollum comes into the mix. There's Shelob, the One Ring's Power, the File of Galadriel, and the Eagles. Hey, the Eagles, a small sign of hope, gain of courage. But I think the illustrations in this game are great. And that's really about the only thing I really like about this game. This is a hard game to recommend. And you guys know that I love simple games. I have a whole playlist dedicated to games that I call effortlessly fun. And that's kind of the sweet spot for me. I like games that are effortlessly fun. I enjoy games where I don't have to think about the rules a lot, where I can just lose myself in the adventure that is happening on the board at my table. And the rules for this game are relatively simple, so it gets that right. What it doesn't get right is the sense of adventure. I really don't feel like I am on an adventure in this game. And another simple game that is based off of a Tolkien work is the Hobbit Adventure board game from ICE. And we have taken a look at this one on the channel before. And this one, to me, feels like a really cool adventure. I like this game. And as a matter of fact, I would recommend, if you're looking for an adventure game based in a Tolkien world, I would look towards the Hobbit Adventure board game before the Lord of the Rings Adventure to Mount Doom. I also think that calling this a 4-player game is a real stretch. It really is a solo game. There is almost nothing for the other players to do. You know, maybe if you could take control, or if you were able to take ownership of one of the members of the fellowship, and then they had certain things that they could do throughout the game to give the other players something to do, to give the other players a decision. You know, maybe each one had a different power depending on the stage that you were in, depending on the area that you were in. I think that would be pretty cool. But as it stands, you really don't have anything else to do. There really isn't much to cooperate on, because there really isn't much of a choice in what you are doing with the dice. The only thing you need to think about is you don't want Sam and Frodo to get too far ahead or ahead at all. You want them to be towards the back, but you want to keep them moving so that keeps the chance of a bunch of bad things from happening. And on your first roll of the encounter dice, you do have a choice to choose which one, but on your second roll, you don't. So I'm not even quite sure why you roll it twice. You should just roll it and then lock in the one you want to have first, and then lock in that second one, because the second one, you're only rolling 1d6, so there isn't really a choice. When it comes to combat, you only roll this die. You don't really have a lot of ways to mitigate that. As the different players start collecting these friendship cards, every player has access to every card that every player has. And so this becomes basically just a communal pool of cards that you can choose when to use or when to not use. And again, you do want to try to hold on to these as long as possible. So maybe if the players owned these cards and kept them secret, then they could play them on somebody else's turn. I don't know. There are probably some ways to make the game feel more cooperative, to not have it feel more like a solo game. But I'm not sure if the game even warrants that effort. And a lot of these games that are really difficult to win, that are hard to win. They're not difficult games, but they're hard to win games. When I do lose, I feel like, oh, okay, I want to play this game again. I want to try to do better. What can I adjust? What changes can I make to my strategy to possibly eke out a win? Maybe just a lucky win. I'll take a lucky win in a lot of games because I'm not very good at games. But with this game, when I lose, I just don't feel like playing it again. And I've had this game since it came out, and I've been meaning to do a video on it, and I just haven't been able to muster up the enthusiasm. So it's a really hard game to recommend. Maybe if it was in a box half the size, if it was a much smaller game, then I might think about keeping it because it could fit in a smaller space on the shelf, might take up less table space, and a smaller box is just easier to play. And I don't expect as much out of a smaller game as I do a larger game like this. But yeah, so that was a pretty quick look at The Lord of the Rings Adventure to Mount Doom, a game with some great art. It looks great. I love the look, but the gameplay for me just isn't there. And so it's just not one that I can recommend to anyone. Not even if I think there are even better family games. You know, a lot of times people will say that a game, well, it's a kid's game, or well, it's a family game. But yeah, that doesn't lessen the responsibility for the game to be good. You know, there are good family games, there are good kids games, and I just don't think that this is one of them unless your family just really, really loves Lord of the Rings. And hey, if they do, you might get into this. You might get something out of this game. So, all right, guys. Well, hope you enjoyed this look at The Lord of the Rings Adventure to Mount Doom. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.